Whenever I go and speak to people, they ask me, what can I do? I'm just one person. And I want to encourage you what one person can do, how they can make a difference. Let's go back to 1776. It's Christmas Day. Washington had just retreated back over to Pennsylvania. He had been fighting the British. There was a general called General Howe, and General Howe chased him around all over New England and New York, and Washington lost 8 major battles. He was discouraged. He started out with 28,000 men. Over that course of 6 months, he was down to 2,400 men. He lost 90% of his military, either through being killed in battle or desertion. Everyone was in despair. They had not eaten for 48 hours. They had not slept for 48 hours. It was bitter cold. Sleet was coming down. It was a bitter cold night. George Washington knew the effort was almost over. He had to do something in order to turn this war for independence around. So what did he do? He went in, he regrouped, and that night he said, all right, he came out and told his soldiers, victory or death will be our motto. And then he read them a poem by Thomas Paine. It's called The Crisis. And Thomas Paine had sent this letter to him. Let me tell you a little bit about Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was a recent immigrant. He'd only been in the colonies. They're now states because of the Declaration of Independence. We became states at that point in time. We declared ourselves states. He'd only been in the States for a couple of years. His family owned a garment factory, and it was bankrupt, going into bankruptcy. His wife had left him. So in his personal life, Thomas Paine had some failures, but he believed in liberty. He believed in freedom. And so he wrote this letter to George Washington. And in this letter, he said, these are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it will be strange indeed if this so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. Thomas Paine. George Washington had all of his commanders read this poem to his 2,400 men. It inspired them to cross the Delaware that Christmas bitter cold evening. Many of these soldiers didn't even have shoes on their feet. They had gunny sacks, and their feet were bleeding from frostbite. They crossed the Delaware River in the darkness of night with cannons, ammunition. They march several miles. Sleet is hitting their face. Picture that, how bitter cold it must be for those individuals. They were going over to Trenton. Trenton was being held by a group of German mercenaries that the King George, had hired, and they were holding down the fort. The commander said, no one will attack on a night like tonight. It's too bitter cold. And so Washington had the element of surprise. He attacked the Hessians, defeated them, which turned the war effort around. That poem by Thomas Paine was read throughout the colonies, which are the states now, but it reinvigorated the people's desire to win their liberty. So one person, you can say Thomas Paine's letter really contributed to the victory for independence because it was used as inspiration to move people, to move their hearts, to move their minds, and to motivate them. So whenever you say, I'm just one person, well, first of all, look down at your feet. Do you have shoes? Are they wrapped in gunny sacks? Secondly, one person can change the world. So I would encourage you, be that one person.